You're asked to cut a project timeline in half without reducing scope. How would you approach it? This is exactly the type of hypothetical scenario that Google loves to pose in their job interviews because this is a likely scenario for a program manager and what they would face in their job at Google. So, in this video, let's dive deep into answering this question using systems based thinking, specifically using a method to answer this type of question. We don't wing it on the behavioral side. We use the STAR method, the CAR method, the PAR method. So, for hypothetical questions, make sure you also use a method. In this video, we will be utilizing the CFAS method that stands for clarify, framework, assumptions, and solutions. And like all hypothetical answers, we're going to tie the solution back to how we would handle this scenario like we're in the role. We always want to act and answer the question like we're already in the position we're interviewing for. And specifically in this video, I pulled up a job description for a program manager 2, strategy and business operations of technical infrastructure at Google. So that's going to be our primary focus in this answer. Let's do it. And so, as always, let's set the scene and imagine our fake interviewer, Sue, asks us the following question. Jeff, you're asked to cut the project timeline in half without reducing scope. How would you approach it? Sue, before diving in, I'd like to ask a few clarifying questions. Is the project currently in execution or are we still in the planning phase? I'd also be curious, are we allowed to increase resources, maybe from a headcount or budget perspective, to meet this timeline? Are the dependencies owned internally by Google Teams or do they include external vendors as well? I'd be curious if the end user of this project is internal or external. And then lastly, I just want to know, are we constrained to keeping the existing technologies and tools in place, or can we explore newer solutions, maybe some AI automation? Okay, a few items we might want to consider before solving are definitely want to be thinking about the scope. We want to think about resourcing, parallelization, dependencies, how we prioritizing, what's our data availability, need to do extensive risk mitigation, then look into the technology and of course the stakeholders and how we're communicating with them. So, before solving, let's definitely dive in and make a few assumptions. I'm going to assume that the key stakeholders are in the server operations lead category, they're technical program managers, and maybe some data analysts within the tech org structure. Then the project is global in nature. So let's say it impacts teams in the Bay Area, specifically Mountain View, Dublin, and Singapore. Our end user is internal teams who are specifically responsible for maybe infrastructure efficiency and cost optimization. The process definitely is going to involve integrating a new analytics dashboard using BigQuery and Looker, which is meant to provide real-time insights for server maintenance and workflows. We can definitely increase resources within reason. We're going to track using current tools we have in place. The original timeline, let's say, was 6 months. Now we need to compress to 3 months. And it came from senior leadership. So it's going to be pretty important. Lots of assumptions. So I think a good starting point for us would be discussing resourcing and parallelization. But is there another area you'd like to focus on first, Sue? Okay, so we dive right in and we'd start by reviewing the critical path using a Gantt chart or dependency matrix. This allows us to isolate which components must happen sequentially versus those that can occur concurrently. So, in most analytics dashboard builds, there's clear separations between data pipeline and development, user interface creation, stakeholder testing, and documentation. So, we would explore decoupling these phases and assigning work to multiple pods running in parallel regions. So, maybe we focus in on the back end in Dublin, the front end in Mountain View, and the QA component in Singapore. Secondly, we'd immediately initiate a resource reallocation conversation with both engineering and analytical leads. And we'd want to see if we could at least secure additional engineer and analyst support in each region over the next 90 days. Then we'd try to see if we could assign a dedicated program analyst to just manage the cross functional communications to reduce our sync time. Lastly, We'd audit all recurring meetings and we'd set up asynchronous status updates via probably shared dashboards to cut meeting time in half, keeping time zones in mind, and implement a follow up model to ensure progress continues across all the time zones. And finally, we just explore contracting a short term vendor to handle like lower value tasks such as documentation or regression testing, and delegating those to free up the higher skilled team members to focus on more strategic tasks. I know it's a lot, but I think we could even dive deeper into resourcing and parallelization, or we could move on and focus a little bit more on dependencies and risk mitigation. Do you have a preference? Okay, let's dive into that second piece. And so, by diving in, first, we need to identify all project dependencies. That is probably going to be a lot of API integrations, data feed schedules, tool access provisioning, stakeholder approvals, and assign clear ownership using a RACI model. We'd flag critical bottlenecks. This could be dependencies on other teams' data model updates, and escalate early and try and get leadership support as well. Now, for each dependency, we definitely create a risk profile with mitigation plans. If a vendor is late delivering a component, what's our plan B? Can we build it with a sample data and maybe swap out real data later? We'd absolutely have to implement a milestone based risk checkpoint system where each work stream completes a weekly kind of self audit focused on not only what was done, but looking at what was blocked and why. And these check-ins should feel and natural and feed into some sort of central risk dashboard, providing leaders with real-time view of a burn down progress and red flags. So for tools and platforms, we'd ensure all users have access to the required environment. So again, definitely looking at BigQuery tables, Looker dashboards before the work even begins. And then this will just help us avoid losing time with Eng and making sure we're ready to move forward with anything we need to move forward with. Finally, we'd structure our documentation to reflect these dependencies and mitigation plans, creating transparency and reducing the single point of failure risks. So, for example, like in Singapore, we have a QA engineer who gets sick. Can a Dublin based counterpart quickly step in? The goal is just to de risk through redundancy and readiness, and not just have these urgent items come up in the moment. So again, a lot in those two areas too. So I think at this point, maybe we could pivot and talk a little bit more about success metrics and outcomes, unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss. Okay, so let's really dive in. At the delivery level, success means deploying the analytics dashboard to the server operations team across three regions. So, how would we track this? Well, we track this in a number of different ways. We'd probably have a launch readiness score. So, what's the percent of regions with 100% tool access, documentation, and onboarding completed before that timeline? What's our bug free deployment rate? We probably don't want to have more than one or two major bugs in those first 30 days of use, a little outside of our control. Absolutely, when we look at adoption rate, 80% of intended users logging in and using the dashboard probably weekly in maybe like a 2 to 4 week post launch scenario. And then a stakeholder satisfaction score. Definitely, if we're looking on a scale, a common scale of five, at least a 4.5 out of five, from senior ops leads, technical PMs in some form of a post mortem survey. We'd have a velocity metric, number of insights produced or operational decisions supported by the dashboard in the first 30 days. And we would also measure the cost of speed. Was quality impacted, or was the team really burned out by having to go through this and increase it, and cut the time in half? And then we always want to do a brief retrospective survey at the 60-day mark. And that's kind of just balancing fast and sustainable. If we prove we can execute at twice the speed without compromising quality, this becomes a repeatable playbook for future cross regional tech initiatives. Sue, I know it's a long answer. I think we've hit a good stopping point, but I'm happy to dive in deeper into some of the areas that we didn't discuss, from scope to prioritization. We definitely didn't get into a lot in data availability, and obviously diving in more into stakeholders and communication. As always, These hypothetical answers in these videos are intended to be robust, to show you if we kind of had a back and forth ensue what this would look like. The goal again is ideal answer. We will not have as robust and concise of an answer in the job interview, but we're trying to build those great clarifying questions, take the framework, build great assumptions, and then build multiple solutions. Create this nice back and forth. So Sue really sees our answer as robust. She sees that we can truly problem solve. So when preparing for these questions, just take a deep breath. Tell your interviewer you're going to take a minute to gather your thoughts. Start writing out some notes down below while referencing your cheat sheet. And always dive in and use a system. And of course, for hypothetical questions, we recommend the CFAS method. Using a system will be a game changer because your best answers will be structured. Good luck and thanks for watching.